There we go.
Well, good morning again today, and it's almost in the winter time, yeah. Well, today I'm going to talk about how animals keep warm in the winter if they have to. Now, I have noticed that the deer, and I've got some friendly deer up by my house. In the summertime, they have this glossy, orangey coat, beautiful, beautiful color. And about a month ago, they turned sort of a dull brown. They had put on their overcoat. And they'll keep their overcoats on all through the winter until springtime. Now, I put an overcoat on, but I take it off when I come in the house. But the deer can't just take it off like that. And notice the same thing with the squirrels. Yep, the squirrels changed color. They got an extra coat of hair. They have an overcoat that lasts them for about 6 months of the year. And it must have a lot of good things in it to keep them warm so long. Now, farther north, I discovered, because I spent some winters in the far northern part of Minnesota, but in northern Minnesota and all the way north into Canada and over to the west in Alaska, there is a creature called the Arctic hare. That's H-A-R-E. And he looked like a rabbit, but a rabbit and a hare aren't the same. And down south in Oklahoma and Texas, those things they call jackrabbits, they're really hares too. But we won't worry about them because they're going to stay down south. Well, anyway, there's a clever animal up there. Well, Mother Nature made the animal pretty clever because in the winter, when there's a lot of snow, the Arctic hare turns white. And it's harder for some eagle or coyote to catch it when it's hard to see it in the snow. Just puts a permanent overcoat on to last until spring. Ha! How do you like that? So nature has its ways of taking care of its own. Now, some creatures just move. And there are some creatures that just move south for the winter and north for the summer. They just kind of disappear in the winter. We're not going to see the robins or the bluebirds and a lot of these other birds until spring again. But we will see chickadees and juncos. They're kind of gray. They look like fat sparrows. They've been they've been up north and they've come south this far. I guess they like cold weather. Well, there are birds that can just go to someplace else when the weather changes. Now, have you ever noticed these wonderful birds that sort of ride the wind? And they're called turkey vultures. They're the cleanup crew. They have very good smell in their beak. And when there's an animal that died somewhere, it's their job to clean it up. Yep. Because they eat dead meat. Well, they've disappeared now, and I've been told that they go to southern Missouri, not any farther than that, and continue to do their job of cleaning up the dead meat from the world. So that's what some creatures do. Now, I know some people who are called snowbirds. They have 2 places to live. I'm glad I don't. Taking care of one house is enough. But they have another place to live down in, I know some of them pretty well. Some of them live here in Decorah. They moved down to West Texas, Arizona, New Mexico for the winter. They got one place to live there and then back here for the summer, which means they have to shut down their winter house here and make sure nothing is going to freeze. And then You know, they live two places. They got two places to go. Now, there are some other people who do it a little more cleverly. I have a sister, a very much younger sister than myself, who has a deal in which she goes into somebody's house to live in the wintertime for only about 2 months. And they come up north because they want to enjoy such things as skiing and snowmobiling. Yeah. So they just rent their house out. And it's not very expensive because what they like is my sister and a whole lot of other people like her take care of the house for 2 months or sometimes even 3 months in the winter where they can stay warm. Yeah. Well, there's an old song that I used to sing 4 verses of when I was in the camping business. In the winter, no, that's not it. Let's see. What will the birdies do then, the poor thing? Da 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 da. Hide their heads under their wings. When the winter comes, what will the birdies do then, the poor things? It's gonna be a long winter. And what will the birdies do then, the poor things? They'll fly to the south with a worm in their mouth and hide their heads under their wings. The poor things. And there's a different verse for each season of the year. Spring, summer, fall, and winter. But it's gonna be a long winter. And what will the birdies do then, the poor things? They'll fly to the south with a worm in their mouth and hide their heads under their wings. The poor things. Well, I had a brother-in-law passed away about 30 years ago, and he worked on these high cranes that go to up, that haul things up to the high floors of Minneapolis and St. Paul. That's where he lived. And he had a vest for the cool weather that has the fleece on the inside. Yeah. So he just puts his vest on when he needs to stay warm or a little bit warmer. Now, of course, the wool is best on the inside. That's not the way the sheep wear its wool, though, is it? The sheep grows the wool like an overcoat. And it gets longer and longer and longer until springtime comes. Now, in old times, and this was true in a lot of parts of the world, when the weather starts to turn warm, the wool is easy to just pull off. So people used to pull the wool off the sheep and then put it on the spinning wheel and turn it into the kind of yarn that they can use to make warm mittens, socks, whatever. So, what do we do about that now? Well, I remember, because we had a farm once, or we lived on a farm where we were supposed to take care of about 60 sheep. And come late March, we had sheep shearing time. And it included dipping the sheep in a special, they had to run right through a little tank where there was something that would kind of take care of the critters that wanted to get into their wool. And then they just had to shiver for a while because they were pretty cold. It was called the sheep shearing time. And so that's how they took care of it. But nowadays, sheep shearing means you have a great big clipper and you hold the sheep, and the guy who did it had to be big and strong because he's got this big sheep in front of him and he goes back and forth until the poor sheep looks like it's much skinnier than it was. And it's a good thing you wait till March because that sheep will get cold. Fortunately, we had a good sheep shed where they could get warm again with lots of hay and straw in it. So we take care of it that way because a lot of people long ago, before people invented these gadgets, with a clipper on them, they would pluck the sheep. And then they would put it on an old-fashioned spinning wheel, and they'd spin it into wool. And of course, I told you about how you use wool in summer and winter. And I discovered this. I'll tell you about it again. I found out that both of my grandpas wore long winter, summer, and winter. Long underwear, summer and winter. And it was wool. Because wool breathes. The sweat goes away. If it's cotton, it soaks in. You want that. And so the cotton gets wet, but wool doesn't. Wool just breathes through your skin like that. And the only difference, and I found that out when I was about 5 years old, and I slept with my grandpa Hanson, and then later on, from when I lived with my grandpa Nelson, I found out that the only difference between summer underwear and winter underwear was the summer underwear had short sleeves, so they could roll up their sleeves. Otherwise, they were the same. They were wool. Now, a lot of people might think wool is itchy. But I think if you grow up with it, and over in Norway, where my ancestors came from, they were used to wearing wool in the winter. And the Norwegians have a saying, there's no such thing as bad weather, just bad clothes. So they were used to it. Summer and winter, long johns like that. And I've got my long underwear on now, but they happen to be cotton. Oh well, they keep me warm. And so that's how they do it. They just have an extra layer. And it's all about where you put it. And a vest is very important, because when your fingers get cold and your toes get cold, now we have overshoes to put on, but that's sometimes not enough. You have to have good socks under those overshoes too. And good, mittens with fleece on them. Oh my goodness, they're terrific. But I wonder how the ladies kept warm. One of the things I noticed about all my Norwegian ancestors, and I've got pictures from when they were back in the 1890s, they all had long beards. And of course, a long beard will keep you warm in the front and long hair in the back until they start to lose their hair in the top. But poor ladies, how did they do it? Because they don't grow beards. They must have to put on scarves like I did. And of course, ladies are good at knitting scarves. And you can knit a scarf that you can wrap around. Well, guess how many times I've got it wrapped around here. And this is a good knit scarf. You see that? And it's very well knit. One of my nieces knit it for me. And I could just put it around like that. And not only keeps my neck warm, but it keeps my back kind of warm too. So there are lots of ways to keep warm in the winter. Now, I heard a funny story once. I had an Uncle Earl who'd go deer hunting. He never shot a deer, I don't know why. And he'd go up north, in northern Wisconsin. I can't think of the names of the towns up there, but in the summertime, the people up in northern Wisconsin make a living by renting out cabins to fishermen. And they will furnish a boat and a guide. But there are not so many that come in the wintertime. Oh, they're the people who come up to go deer hunting. They'll be there for a week and a half at the most. And the people nowadays who go up there to go snowmobiling, but they're not going to stay long. So how do you get them to stay longer? Well, My uncle used to go to a kind of a place where there was a bar and rooms to rent too. And the lady would say, my husband, he hibernates all winter like a bear. Really? And then she'd take them into the next room and she'd say, shh, he's hibernating. And of course he'd be snoring away down there. And it just kind of helped boost business a little bit in the wintertime. And of course there are those creatures, like the bears who hibernate in the winter. They have a nice den and they crawl in, and their heart beats slower and slower and slower, but it's got to be a good warm den. And that's where they'll be even when their little babies are born. And the little babies will be drinking milk from mother down there until it gets warm enough in the springtime and they come out. So hibernating is something that some creatures do. So there are a lot of different times, a lot of different ways to stay warm in the winter. And I like to see how nature does it, you know. And I get a kick out of it when I see the squirrels looking fatter than they were. They're not fatter than they were. They just have an overcoat on. And the same with the deer. So Mother Nature has all sorts of ways to keep us warm when we need to keep warm. Now, if you just stay in one place, if my ancestors had stayed in Norway, where they came from, they wouldn't have to change around so much and they wouldn't have these summer homes somewhere else. But we came to this country, and so we have to put up with it. That the seasons aren't the same here as they are in Norway and Sweden. So we have to make up for it with the clothes we wear. And if we put on an overcoat, it better be the kind that we can take off when we come in the house. Because I don't want to wear my overcoat all winter like the squirrels and the deer do. Well, anyway, stay as warm and toasty as you can. But I think they'll keep you in pretty good temperature over there at Asahaugenholm. And I miss seeing you. But anyway, you can see me for better or for worse.